Hi, and welcome to a special Easter instalment of our regular tips and tricks episodes. It's that wonderful time of the year when Max's egg spline finally makes some sense, and to celebrate we're going to demonstrate 3 ways to randomise and manipulate textures on Easter eggs using RailClone or RailClone Lite. First, we'll look at using a macro to randomly sample tiles from a single texture. Second, we'll select colours by sampling them from a random pixel on a map. And thirdly and finally, we'll use a map applied to a surface to control a mask that blends between the previous 2 techniques. Before we do that though, we'll take a quick look at a macro that was created specially for this tutorial that creates phyllotactic spirals. That's just a fancy word that describes the kind of patterns you see in nature, best exemplified by the seeds on a sunflower. To create this effect we'll use RailClone, and we've provided a simple macro in the download. It'll also soon be available in the transform section of the built-in macros. But to use it, all you need to do is to add a new segment and then select your geometry from the scene. In this case, it's an egg. Don't forget to apply the same material to the RailClone object and then wire the segment to the macro's input. Create a new L1S generator and wire the macro to its default input. And then increase the size of this generator from the properties panel to control the size of the circle. If you'd like to rotate the eggs, you can still do so using the fixed rotation properties. You might also want to adjust the padding to get them to overlap slightly. The macro will take both these changes into account automatically. You can also randomise transforms to add some jiggle too if you like. Finally, you can add a clipping spline should you wish to use the macro to fill an area. This could be used to create an interesting paving effect, for example. So now that we've got a basic style set up, we can start playing with the materials. I'd like to randomly apply several patterns to these eggs, but I don't really want to have to create loads of individual maps. One solution is to find a texture that contains several tiles in a stacked formation. In this example, I've used a simple patchwork texture I found online. You can then automatically offset the UVs to grab each of these individual tiles. It's a really quick approach. Here's how that works. First of all, make sure the source geometry, our egg, is mapped using the whole of the texture, UV spaced 0 to 1. This means it should display a complete texture with all the tiles. Create a new extract tiles stack bond macro from the UV and materials group. This has been updated recently, so if you don't have the new one, use the one that's in the tutorial file. Wire it between the existing macro and the generator. Then set the number of tiles on U value to the number of tiles horizontally on your texture. In the example with this download, there are 15 tiles. Then set the number of tiles on the V value to the number of tiles vertically on your texture. In this example, there are 9 tiles. If the tiles are slightly random sizes or you want to remove the joints between them, you can then use the fixed offset and tile adjust settings to crop in on each square a little bit closer. It just takes a little experimentation to get it right. And then that's it. You've now randomly extracted the patches from this texture and distributed them randomly on the eggs. It's a really handy macro for paving, walls, facades and much more. If you didn't need textures, but you wanted to sample colours instead, you can do that easily using RailClone Colour, which has the ability to use a colour sampled from a random pixel of a map. Here's how this one works. First of all, open the material editor and pick the material off of the RailClone object. Wire a new RailClone Colour map to the diffuse input. Enable the tint setting. This allows you to apply a colour picked either from a gradient or a map. Leave random strength minimum and maximum on 100%. And then click on the Get Colour from Map button and load the map you wish to extract colours from. Finally, choose the blending mode. These are akin to the blending modes in Photoshop, and they're used to mix the colour selected using the tint features with the textures randomised from the map section above. In this case, we don't have any maps, and we want to just use the tint colour, so you can change the blending mode to normal. And that's it. If you render now, you'll have eggs tinted using colours that have been randomly selected from that texture, pastel colours in this case. And then finally, we can combine these 2 techniques using a third RailClone Colour map. Not many people are aware of this, but by outputting black and white values, RailClone Colour can easily be used as a mask. In this example, we'll use the pastel colours to write the name i2 software and tint the remaining eggs using the patchwork textures we created earlier. Here's how you do that. First of all, you'll need to add a surface to your RailClone style that will be used to place the mask texture. Just add a surface node and then wire it to the generator's surface input. Pick a mesh from the scene. Normally this is used to project the segments onto the surface, but since it's planar, there's no visible effect. Now go to the material editor, create a new mix map and wire it to the material's diffuse input. Wire the patchwork texture to the mix map's first input. Wire the pastel RailClone color map to the second input. Then create a new RailClone color map and wire it to the mixer mount input. Select the new RailClone color map, go to the properties and enable tint. Change the mode to as texture on surface and set the blending mode to normal just like we did before. Click on Get Color from Map and then pick a black and white mask map. This will now mix the two mech textures using a mask placed under the RailClone object using the surface's UV mapping. And that's it. If you render now, you'll have masked between the two texture randomization approaches. Now, this is perhaps not an everyday usage for these techniques, but I hope you can see that this will be useful for all kinds of other purposes. And one final note, if you're using Corona or another engine other than V-Ray and material effects are not working, you might need to disable the instancing engine from the display rollout. Thanks and happy Easter, stay tuned for more coming soon, and remember if you've got a question you'd like to see explained in a short tutorial, just let us know on the forum or in the comments below this video.